Beatrice, thank you for joining this radio program. Could you tell me how you came to Kosovo and how you started to work for Wiliјam Vokera and the Kosovo verification mission?
Yes, certainly, Kristian. What happened is that I was just back from China, and I found a lot of phone calls from the French Minister of Foreign Affairs saying that Ambassador Vokera wanted me to be his spokesperson. At that time, I knew nothing about the Kosovo situation, and I had asked to join as an observer. In fact, at that time, I thought that the Kosovo Albanians were the victims and that I should go and help them by observing the situation. So I first went to Vienna, but Ambassador Vokera did not come because he was afraid he could not go back to Kosovo. The relationship was not very good with the Serbs at that time for him. And later, about 2 weeks later, I met him in London. He said this to me: "For me, you worked for the BBC, you were born in Washington, D.C., so you must be pro-American and pro-British, and you would be an excellent spokesperson." That is how I became the spokesperson for the OSCE.
So this was in 1998. What month was this?
No, this was not. This was just 2 months before the evacuation of the OSCE. This was in January 1999. Oh no, I think. Let me think now. You're right. I'm sorry. It was in 98. That's correct. My mistake. It was in 98, of course. It was 2 months before the evacuation. I arrived in Kosovo in January.
Many Serbians, they don't believe in the story of Račak, that this was a massacre of Albanian civilians. What is your recollection of these days?
I will tell you what my recollection is. At the time, at the beginning, Ambassador Vokera was pleasant, and I had no reason not to believe what was said. So I remember going to the funeral and trying to follow him because his bodyguards were so close I couldn't hear a single thing, and I had to be able to hear what he said to tell the press. I remember that the French ambassador, Gabrielle Keller, told me, "Račak did not happen like this. This is not what happened." Unfortunately, I did not believe Ambassador Keller at the time. Later, of course, I understood what the truth was, that the Serbian army had actually officially told everybody that they were going to Račak because there were some UČK fighters. This was no secret. And as the Finnish head of the forensic investigation said...
Helena Ranka.
Exactly, Helena Ranka. What happened was, I was at her press conference and she explained that the evidence had been mostly destroyed by the OSCE because it was trampled all over. She explained that what happened is that some civilians got caught in a conflict between UČK fighters and the Serbian army. And then they were dressed up to look like a massacre. And this is what the world should, this is what mostly everybody knows today, and this is what the world should know. Some people hang on to the Račak, which is, you have to see Moral Combat by Alan Little. And that is
it's excellent documentary, excellent documentary. If the listeners of РадиоДИР has an opportunity to see this documentary, they should find it on YouTube.
And yes, absolutely. They can find also the transcript on the internet. That's right.
So this is very interesting what you're saying here, that the French ambassador actually knew the truth. How was this not communicated, or how was this communicated to the Americans?
Well, I think Ambassador Keller had limited powers. He couldn't go over Ambassador Walker's head. And I have to tell you that as a spokesperson, I could see that Walker was extremely cautious of my communication with anyone at the State Department. In fact, in writing, he forbade me from communicating with anyone from the White House. I occasionally got queries from the White House and simply wrote what I had to write, what I was telling the world as spokesperson. And he saw this correspondence and he said, no, you are not to communicate in any way, because Ambassador Walker, as again moral combat by Alan Little-Stowe, he had one version in Kosovo and another version for the White House. So I think Gabriel Keller did his best, but he was number 2 in the OSCE, and there was little he could do.
So who was William Walker working for? Was he working for the State Department or maybe some intelligence structures like the CIA?
Well, at the time there were rumors, and there was little access to the, just after the NATO war, there was little access to the internet. But of course, later, if you go on the internet, it is no secret that Ambassador Walker was in Salvador and had a long career with the CIA. So I will let you make up your own mind about this.
So how much was Ratchak a pretense, a precondition for the NATO bombing on March 24, 1999? Would the NATO bombing would have been possible without the pretense of a massacre in Ratchak?
That is absolutely right. Ratchak was what you call the straw that broke the camel's back. It was necessary to turn around public opinion. A massacre like this is, of course, horrifying, and it was all that was needed. Again, there was a lot of evidence that everything was done for Rambouillet to go ahead. We know that the State Department, Madeleine Albright, did her best to convince the head of the Albanians to join in the talks because he didn't want to do anything, and it was necessary for him to join because otherwise there was no reason to be able to bomb. So clearly Ratchak was key. How much, you know how the CIA operates, how much the State Department actually in Washington DC knew about all this, no one will ever know. Anyway, that's what happened.
So I have myself seen CIA involvement in trying to destabilize Serbia. I have seen how they have been training UTK terrorists. I call them terrorists, not fighters, in the ground safety zone around Kosovo. And we have the Albanian terrorist Florim Ejupi, who was working directly for the CIA. And he and his team was responsible for blowing up the Niš Express on February 16, 2001. How long was this CIA game? How long did they plan this before? Because in early 1998, they said that OTK was a terrorist organization.
It's very difficult. Obviously, I came in late. When I arrived, I knew nothing of this. So I suppose it had been usually the way that it operates is that they start with propaganda and so on. I can tell you what happened afterwards, after the KVM, when I came back to Kosovo. But what I can tell you is that I myself had evidence of secret operations in Pristina when I was the spokesperson. I can tell you that Ambassador Walker was shadowed by an American colonel who was in his mid-40s, Mike Phillips, and he, on the one hand, could be very charming and very polite and looked like, very preppy, as you say in English. He looked like the perfect gentleman, and on the other hand, he would be very brutal and use foul language, and he behaved badly, and I know that Walker would go nowhere without him. So he would have been CIA clearly, and also there was another famous figure, a British general called Dreviankiewicz, John Carroll Dreviankiewicz, who was a totally cynical, brutal personality, and he may well have been involved in this plot.
What about guys like William Holbrooke? He was very much involved from the U.S. State Department side. How well did he cooperate with other intelligence structures of the Americans?
Listen, I do not know. All I know is when I watched Moral Combat, I saw a picture of William Holbrooke, who had come to Kosovo without a province of Serbia, without telling President Milosevic, and he is photographed sitting down on the floor, surrounded by two UÇK fighters squatting next to him with their guns. So that was a very embarrassing photograph for him. That is all I know.
Jovan, you can maybe speak a bit in Serbian. Vi ste slušali sada, jel vi imate pitanje za Beatrice?
Pa dosta sam razumeo sumnje u to, gospodin, to jest ambasador Voker, da li je radio direktno pod američkim snagama ili vladi, ili je bio u CIA-i, je li tako bilo nešto?
Da, tako, to je diskusija, to Beatrice ne zna za sada. Ali nevjerovatno je priča kao što je Beatrice pričala sada. Ona je bila portparol Kosovo Verification Mission.
Da.
I ovo je bio vrlo pridlove igre Amerikance. Da pitam Beatrice. Beatrice,
yeah?
What do you think of this dirty game of the Americans? I mean, they say that they work for democracy and human rights. Should we have any confidence when the Americans are going to war to protect human rights and democracy?
It's on the one hand, I was born in the United States, and I think the American people are not aware always of what their government has done in many countries. Clearly also, the Americans were not alone. They were supported in this by Britain. There is no question about that. And also, clearly, this is a very ugly game. And who can approve when you know what really happened? Kosovo was a sham, and the NATO war was illegal. The United Nations never approved of it. I still remember the spokesman saying, "Oh, we've had just a little bit of collateral damage," and of course we know how many civilians, totally innocent people, were killed during the bombings. We also know that the Kosovo Albanians had to flee. They were also victims of this this bombing, and so it went on because, of course, the results of this bombing and Kosovo becoming so-called independent has left the country and a lot of churches have been destroyed. We know that Serbs have been persecuted, so we know also the devastating consequences for Metohija, the cradle of Serbian Orthodoxy. So
yes, and Serbians should, of course, whenever they have a chance, go to visit the monasteries in Kosovo, Dečani, and all the other monasteries. But let's move back to March 22nd, 23rd, the evacuation of the KVM mission in their orange trucks. Could you tell us what happened these days?
Well, I can tell you that obviously the evacuation had been planned all along, probably organized essentially by John Dreventjević, but of course they pretended that it was a big surprise, and suddenly at 3 in the morning we had to be evacuated. So what I remember.
What date was it? This was 22nd or 23rd?
It was 20 years ago. I can send you. I have this in writing somewhere. I do not have it in my head, so I can't tell you exactly.
But it was just before the bombing.
Oh yes, of course. What I can tell you, okay, I can't tell you what day it was, but it was, I remember it snowed heavily. We all had to go at 3 in the morning. What happened, I must also say that at that stage I was no longer spokesperson, because I'm very glad to say that I had been, my mobile phone had been taken away from me, and I had absolutely no role, and I was very thankful for that, because I did not want, at that stage, I understood what was happening, and I did not want any part of it. So what happened is that we all got into cars. We went to Macedonia. We traveled without any problem, all of us, all the KVM traveled to Macedonia. We arrived in the capital. We were not welcome. Ambassador Walker sent a message saying, "Oh, hello, we'll be back soon, take care," just before people were bombed, which I thought was ridiculous. And we had, because the atmosphere in general, people, the Macedonians, felt that we were not welcome. We went to Ohrid on the lake, and the bombing started, I think, 2 or 3 days later, and it was one of the worst days of my life, I remember.
So what made you, the William Walker and everything, did you protest publicly or internally within the KVM at that time?
I don't understand.
Before you lost your position as spokesperson?
Oh, there was nothing I could do. I had been in touch with some journalists, particularly a German one, who knew a lot more than me outside. So I wrote a few articles for his publication under a false name, under the name of I forget the name just now. Anyway, I wrote a few stories later. At the time, I was totally helpless. I do remember telling General Dreventjević what I thought of him, because before that, they staged a very stupid incident in order to have an excuse for me not being the spokesperson anymore. So it was done in a very clumsy way. I won't go into it now, but anyway, as you can imagine, there was nothing I could do. I had no mobile phone, I could communicate with no one, so there I was in Macedonia, and that's it. A few days later, I got a plane back home, and that was the end of it. For then.
But who organized your removal? You think William Walker was personally involved in this?
Oh yes, I think he told me once that he was sorry or something. He said something like that to me at one stage. Of course, I think, he basically, he was a typical, very good agent. He was not aggressive or rude like Dreventjević or like Mike Phillips. He was always pleasant, and so he did what he was told. He was in charge. He, of course, is responsible, But I must say that he just told me, "Oh, I'm sorry for what happened," and that's it. You know. That's it.
So this must have been organized by someone higher up.
No. It was organized clearly by Mike Phillips and Drevjenkiewicz, who were technically under him, but who basically looked at, and of course they were quite right to remove me, because by that time I was already in touch with for my job as a spokesperson. I was completely ignorant when I came. I was even pro Kosovo Albanian, but I could see for myself that the MUP, as they were called, the police, were not the monsters that they were said to be. And of course I had contacts with the BBC, with a number of journalists, and I heard everything they said, because my job was to speak to them. So after a while, I understood the situation better, and I think, yes, I became a danger to the operation, and so I should have been removed, quite rightly. Now, Walker was too busy with other things, so who picked this up? Mike Phillips and Drevjenkiewicz, and so they quite rightly told him to remove me and created some stupid incident so that there was an excuse officially to remove me. So it's very logical.
Have you talked to Alan Little after these events?
Yes, of course, and so I was interviewed in Moral Combat.
Excellent. Jovan,
Yes.
kako zvuči? Jel imate neki pitanje za Beatrice?
Pa evo ja ću pokušati da postavim pitanje koliko po njenim saznanjima, da li barata sa cifrom, da li je do OSCE stiglo informacije koliko Srba je moralo da, i onih koji nisu Srbi, morali da pređu u Srbiju. Da li u OSCE imali su te podatke tada?
Yes, Jovan is asking the question now if you in the OSCE had information about Serbians at that time in 98 and 99 that had to flee to Serbia because of oppression and terrorism from Albanians.
When I was before the bombings, absolutely not. There was no information you can imagine. No. Not until after the bombings, when it became very clear that the churches were being destroyed, that people were being persecuted. But before the bombings, there was no such information.
Excellent. Jovan?
Da. Razumeo sam nešto, nisu imali informaciju za vreme i posle bombardovanja, je li tako nešto?
Posle bombardovanja, ona je otišla pre bombardovanja.
Aha.
Ne, nije imala podaci da Srbi su otišli pre bombardovanja.
Da, znam, sa pokretanjem snaga. Ne znam šta još, spominjalo se Makedonija i nisam dobro razumeo taj deo u Makedoniji. Pokušao sam da propratim, ali...
Makedonci rekli da KVM nisu bili dobrodošli tamo. Oni su osjetili neprijatnost kad su bili u Ohridu. I sve je bio planiran. Agent ЦИА, Mike Phillips, on je bio mnogo važnije nego Wiliјam Voker.
Da.
I tako da kratko objasnam. I ona je izgubila svoju poziciju kao portparol i rekla je da oni su bili u pravu. Zato što ona je otkrila istina. A istina ne ide zajedno za misiju.
A u vezi one Finske, šta je ona bila sudija što je otkrila...
Helena Ranta.
Da.
Helena Ranta, da. Jovan is asking about Helena Ranta. Did you talk to her when she was in Kosovo?
Yes, I did. Yes, absolutely, I did. We have stayed in touch. I haven't heard from her for some years, but I still have her contact. And she told me this. When she came for the press conference, she met with Walker. And she told him what she was going to say at the press conference. And she was not going to say that Račak was a massacre. And
just to translate. Ja, Beatrice kaže da Helena Ranta je bila na konferenciji sa Štampa i ona je rekla William Walker da neće da kaže da ovo je masakr. Please continue, Beatrice.
And so this is, I think she wrote this anecdote in her biography. I think it's very famous now. But what William Walker did was he picked up a pencil on the table, he cut it in two, and he threw the pieces of the pencil in her face. He was so angry.
Ovo je mnogo dramatično, William Walker nije bio srećan uopšte. On je uzeo olovku i sekao je u dva dela i bacio sam olovku na lice Helena Ranta. Please, Beatrice.
So, Helena Ranta, I had a transcript of her press conference, and I still remember because I took a lot of notes, everything she said, and as I told you, she made a very thorough forensic investigation. For instance, she said that when you normally, if someone has been touching gunpowder, you can tell on their fingers, but then so many things can interfere with that, and so she could not pick up that the men who were dead and supposedly massacred had touched gunpowder, but clearly for her there was no question that it was not a massacre, but that they were civilians caught in a crossfire. That was the conclusion. They were dressed up to look like they were victims of a massacre.
Da, Helena Ranta je rekla na Štampa sa novinari, u konferenciji sa novinari, da nije bio masakr. To je bio civilisti koji su bili u vatru kada su MUP i vojska Jugoslavije borili protiv UČK.
Da.
Please. Jovan, je li imate dodatne pitanje?
Da, bilo se pričalo o tome da su donošena tela sa drugih krajeva, pa su skidali uniforme UČK i ta tela polagali tu u Račku. O tome je pričalo se u Srbiji tada.
Yes. He's saying that the civilians were dressed in UČK uniforms. What do you know about that?
I don't remember. I don't think so. No, because that would have been the truth that they were soldiers fighting for UČK. No, I think I remember that the victims, let's say, the men who were killed in the crossfire, they were dressed in civilian clothes. They had been dressed again, and they were all aligned. I forget the details, but it was made to look like a massacre, and it had not been one. That is clear.
Da, ona je jasna da ovo nije bio masakr uopšte.
Da, ali bilo je priče o tome da dosta civila je dovlačeno iz drugih krajeva i da u stvari to nisu bili civili nego UČK vojnici koji su stradali u borbama.
Da, Beatrice kaže da nema podaci da priča su to sa sada.
Da, pa dobro, razumljivo. Pa ne znam, posle toga Račka je nastalo bombardovanje i Beatrice je morala da ode, jel tako? Ili je smenjena, ili je prošao mandat, jel tako?
Da, ona je otišla, izgubila je poziciju kao portparol i onda je uzeo avion od Skoplje kući i to je to, u Francuskoj.
Aha. Ništa, ja ne znam šta bi još tu, slušao sam dosta toga, zanimljivih stvari, pa ne znam šta bi ja još da dodam na to. Uglavnom je ona nama objasnila sve situacije, pa vidjet ćemo da to prevedemo, pa kad budemo napravili video klip da to sve ide sa titlom.
Beatrice, thank you so much for being with us. will put this on YouTube. This is live streaming on the radio, and whoever understood could understand it. But we'll make a YouTube video with the subtitles later on. Jovan will do that. Jovan će da pravi YouTube video malo kasnije i da ima srpski prevod na ova video, da veća publika u Srbiji može da zna šta se dešava u Račak i sa KVM, Kosovo Verification Mission, i ОЕБС na Kosmetu 98. i 99. Jovan.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for having me, and of course the world should know what really happened.
Svijet treba da zna šta se dešava, kaže Beatrice.
Mrs. Beatrice, thank you very much from you want to tell us what is in the world, what is in this moment Račak in 1998
15th of January 1999.
Yes. Thank you very much, and all listeners from РадиоДИР.
And thank you, and my best to the Serbian people. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.